I'm Bill Price with growthlaw.com, and this video is going to discuss what approvals are necessary for you as an international investor or investment group to invest in U.S. real estate. I'm also going to discuss whether or not it is legal for investors to own certain types of real estate in some states. And finally, I'm going to talk about getting approval to bring money into the United States of America for real estate investment or other investment purposes. The first questions you have to think about is it legal for an international investor to own land or own other things in the United States? The rule of law in this country is generally that yes, international corporations, other entities they organize here, things owned by internationals are permitted any type of ownership in the United States. There are some restrictions on a state-by-state basis with respect to agricultural property. A few states, like South Dakota and North Dakota, actually prohibit international investors, except when they inherit land or otherwise move back here, to own agricultural properties. Most states have gotten rid of those restrictions, and agriculture only covers land growing crops. That does not cover commercial investments, that doesn't cover agribusiness, that doesn't cover manufacturing in an agricultural community. So, in general, even under state law, U.S. owned by internationals or international entities or persons can own property in the United States. The second question is what approvals you will need to invest in U.S. real estate organizations. This depends on a couple of processes. First, if there's more than 10 million involved in a deal, there may be antitrust review from the Bureau of Competition at the Federal Trade Commission. That is simply a matter of submitting paperwork to show that the combination is not going to injure competition among businesses in the United States. So the Sprint T-Mobile combination is subject to antitrust review, even though it's a domestic pair of businesses. And for international companies, like I said, anything over 10 million, you have an additional set of paperwork. For most other properties, there is no particular international registration, just the usual registration to do business of the business entity that is used to own the property, to hold the property, to manage the property, possibly with the use of management companies, and then, of course, to distribute profits to the owners. The next question you need to look at is, can you get your money into the United States? This is more of a problem in some countries than others. In China, for instance, there is a day-by-day limit for ordinary citizens as to how much money they are allowed to take out of the country. This type of limit usually means that people have to do workarounds, such as investment in Hong Kong entities, or else investment of money into goods, which then get exported. The exports are sold, and then the export profits get applied to real estate deals around the world, but are never transferred out of China in the first place. So these are things that you use local counsel for to make sure your transfer out is legal. When looking at transfer in, there are two major sets of regulations that have to be considered, and these are administered usually by U.S. banks. The first is the USA Patriot Act requirement that monies not be used to assist terrorism. Terrorism is a difficult subject because nobody knows for sure who is on the terrorist watch list. The numbers and the people change all the time. It's the job of the security department in an international bank to make sure names on a bank account do not match those on one of these watch lists. There is a legal process for application to the FBI with proof of legal source of funds and you not being in terrorism through a domestic police or other Interpol member organization to get off such watch lists, though that can take time as well. In any case, there is a certification process. Second, banks have to think about the legal source of money coming in for any given bank account under what are called the Know Your Customer regulations of the Comptroller of the Currency, which regulates national banks. Again, the Security Department of individual banks deal with this. The purpose of this review is to make sure that investments do not come from drug deals or are not otherwise laundering the proceeds of crimes. There are two simple methods which you can use to avoid some of the problems that some domestic U.S. banks provide for international investors and organizations. The first and easiest is to establish a banking relationship with a U.S. bank that already operates in the international investor's home country. They can be familiar with banking operations from having handled legitimate business transactions. They can be familiar with the individual and do credit reports and other verification of money. And once a bank account already exists, it is much easier to have that account recognized in another branch of the same bank, possibly in the United States, than it is to set up in a brand new bank and get all of the approvals necessary internally and externally to transfer funds. The one thing I would say is make sure you take enough time, get the approvals done, and make sure your money can get to a deal if you're going to make an international investment. When you have U.S. citizens or U.S. blocking corporations set up by international owners, another set of regulations that comes in are the foreign account reporting requirements. For these, any U.S. citizen or organization is required to report to the Internal Revenue Service if it controls an account in an international location. So if the U.S. blocker corporation owns an account in the Cayman Islands, that account has to be reported to the Internal Revenue Service, which will then be looking at transfers over to make sure they are or are not properly paid for under U.S. taxes. In addition, there may be some limits on international investors or on persons of particular religions that require different types of approvals or structures. So, for instance, in Germany, an open-ended investment fund is not allowed to take a majority interest in an international joint venture. If it were therefore to invest, it would probably want to be in a consortium where it was comfortable in a minority position, or might need special rights, as in an LLC, to deal with fiduciary problems with any majority owner in the United States. Similarly, you may have difficulties if you are a Muslim investor or an investor from a Muslim country, such as a sovereign wealth fund. These international investors cannot use interest because of the Sharia protection against such interest-bearing loans. For Sharia-compliant deals, there are international Islamic banking organizations which can usually set up partnership-type ventures where shared profits and shared risks come into the question for defined periods of time, as opposed to specific and fixed interest amounts. I'm Bill Price from growthlaw.com, and I thank you for your time.